Hello out there, we're on the air, it's hockey night tonight.
What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Light in the Lamp podcast. This is going to be episode 2. We took a bit of a short break to let free agency kind of ride out. And there's still some names on the board, but we figured we'd talk about free agency while a lot of big names have gone off the board. So that's going to be the general theme of this episode. Like I said, we're still waiting on contracts for guys like Jake Gardiner, and especially the big one being Mitch Marner. But most of the other guys are kind of where they're going to be. So that's what we're going to start talking about. And I think we're going to start talking with the big two fish in free agency that everyone wanted to land. Artemi Panarin and Sergei Bobrovsky.
The sheriff.
You're on the case, Bobrovsky, but now you're on the case in South Beach. Bobrovsky goes to the Florida Panthers.
Yeah, he's in Miami Vice now.
Yeah, he's just...
He can be Don Johnson in Miami Vice now.
He goes there on a 7-year, $10 million deal. And, of course, everyone knows Artemi Panarin, 7 years, $11.6 million to the New York Rangers.
Yeah.
I know you're excited about that. Give me your take as a Rangers fan on landing probably the biggest fish in free agency this year.
So, well, the thing with being a Rangers fan and signing really high-priced free agents is it brings flashbacks to every time we tried it and it didn't work. So, but I'm excited because, you know, it's Artemi Panarin, you know, the bread man, one of the most dynamic players in the league. 82 points or something last season, 89 points or something. I don't know. I just think I'm excited. It'll be fun to have like an actual game breaker on the roster for once instead of, you know, because the last time we had one was probably Marian Gaborik in his 2 40-goal seasons. Rick Nash never quite lived up to the hype as being the game breaker they needed for him.
So not only that, but the Rangers also signed Jacob Trouba, who they had traded for
To a 7-year, $8 million.
7 years by 8.
Which is about what I expected. It's a little more than market value, but they wanted to buy back that year of free agency, restricted free agency from him.
So, yeah, Panarin, 28 goals, 59 points, 59 assists, 87 points. So it really hasn't been that long since we were reading that letter. You know,
2 years.
We're gonna buy into the rebuild. And the Rangers also have a lot of their young Russian prospects coming over this year. Where do you think these two things, the Jacob Trouba trade and the Panarin signing, puts them in terms of their rebuild?
Well, the rebuild's over, right? Now it's more of just like making sure the players get to where they need to be, like, I guess, maturity-wise. Like, the Rangers pretty much turned themselves into a playoff bubble team by drafting Capo Caco, who's ready to play in the NHL, signing Artemi Panarin, Zibanejad's still going to be there, and then we still have Chris Kreider, who they might trade still. But then you trade for Jacob Trouba, who's a number one defenseman on the team, number one defenseman on a lot of teams in the NHL. You still have Henrik Lundqvist. You have guys like Vitaly Kravtsov coming over, Igor Shesterkin. You still have Henrik Lundqvist, who played some of the best hockey of his career, ironically enough, last January. Single-handedly trying to carry the Rangers into the postseason.
Where do you think this puts... The Rangers' goaltending is an interesting thing because clearly, like you said, the rebuild is kind of over at this point. They're in that mode of... They're not maybe not going to sell out at the trade deadline and go for like high-price rentals at this point yet, but clearly they're trying to be a competitive team. Lundqvist has been great for them. He probably doesn't have that many years left in his body at this point, just from the volume of shots and the volume of games he had to play.
He's been playing, yeah.
So it's an interesting question because where do you think this puts the Rangers? Because right now they're going into the season with Henrik Lundqvist, Alexander Georgiev, who played not almost all of them. He played most of the games after the trade deadline down the stretch, and Igor Shesterkin, who's considered one of the best goalie prospects in the National Hockey League. Where do you think this kind of settles his team at now?
Well, Henrik Lundqvist has, I think, 2 years left on that contract, right? So I think in reality, it's like, no, they're never going to trade Henrik Lundqvist. You don't trade Henrik Lundqvist.
He's going to retire in New York if he wants to.
Yeah. I don't even think he doesn't want to leave, so like he's going to be a New York Ranger. Like that's what it is, right? Like, so it is what it is. Like there's no getting rid of Henrik Lundqvist, and that's fine. like I don't care that he's gonna retire a New York Ranger. It's just like it just makes kind of a logjam, and I think really what it is like, but I think it's fine because a guy like Shesterkin's gonna need a little bit of time to adjust to the NHL ice as opposed to the international ice, which is what the KHL plays on, which is 100 feet wide as opposed to 85 feet wide. So he's gonna have to like learn that shots come in faster from the NHL, closer and harder than they are at the KHL level. Because if a guy's shooting from the outside, he's got an extra 15 feet to get pushed to the boards. So the shots come in from much further away. It's also a much more like there's a lot less shots. Like they're a lot less frequent and it's a lot less chaotic from what I understand the KHL because it's not,
it's not checking, so it's not as like bouncy.
Well, there's checking, but it's not like the North American game, which is like very like because the ice is smaller, like everything's closer together. Like it's more chaotic in front of the net. If a shot gets through, like you kick it out, and I was like 4 guys fighting for it on top of you. Like it's a little different. Right. KHL's like you can kick it out, and like there's room because the ice is wide. There's so much more space on the ice. Like guys are gonna be standing right on top of you. So I don't know. It's interesting. I think he'll be fine with a season in the AHL. And then we have to figure out what we do with him and Georgiev because I think Georgiev earned himself an NHL's roster spot. He played amazing. I don't know, maybe he played really well for the Rangers down the stretch. Like he proved he can play in the NHL at some capacity, right? Whether he can carry the workload of 60 starts a season is really up in the air, but like he could at least play half of them. Like it wasn't his fault the Rangers were losing games. Like they just weren't good. Like we have fucking Brendan Smith and Kevin Shattenkirk eating a lot of our cap, and like they're both kind of not good. So hey, fun.
Let's keep talking about goalies here, and then let's switch over to the big dude, big name on the block, which was Sergei Bobrovsky going to the Florida Panthers, 7 years, $10 million. They also signed another pretty significant piece in Anton Strawman, 3 years, $5.5 million.
It's a lot for Anton Strawman at this point in his career. Strawman's kind of old now. He's like 32, I think. Yeah,
he's getting up there. But where do you think this now puts the Panthers? Because the Panthers, they have
if
a young core.
They don't make the playoffs now, then I don't know what. Like they added Joel Quenneville behind the bench, which firing Bob Boughner Boughner was kind of weird to me because I felt like he did all right with what he had. He never got them into the playoffs, but when your goaltending is constantly hurt, right? You have Roberto Luongo, who's constantly injured in the last years of his career because
he was like 41, 40. He's an older guy.
One of the greatest of all time, but like he'd seen a lot of shots for a lot of years, so that's kind of what happens. So for that, to fire Boughner over that was kind of stupid to me, but like you had Joel Quenneville, so like one of the greatest coaches of all time, one of the winningest coaches of all time, to your bench. I think like if he can't manage to get a roster that includes Mike Hoffman, who had 28 goals last season, I want to say he was close to 30, because he was on a tear at one point. Him, you have Barkov, Huberdeau, Aaron Ekblad,
one of the
and now Sergei Bobrovsky.
Yeah,
and you drafted Spencer Knight.
Which that's an interesting one because I feel like, had they flopped on Bobrovsky, that would have left this team in a real bad spot, especially with Luongo retiring.
And then trading Reimer away.
And trading James Reimer. If they flopped on Bob, that really would have put this team in a very tough spot.
I think the reason that they were so... there's the free agent window opens, right? The week before free agency to talk to free agents. You're not supposed to discuss, contract or numbers or anything, but of course you're discussing numbers and contract length and position on the team. So I think based on those discussions Florida was having, they were pretty confident they were going to get Bobrovsky because you don't trade away. Okay, so I like Mike Hoffman at 36 goals. You don't trade away somebody like James Reimer has proven they could start in the NHL and play a lot of games. Not like an elite level, but an above average level, or an average level anyway. And then, not think you're going to land, or Sergei Bobrovsky,
Yeah, I think that's kind of what it boils down to. And they signed this backup, Sam Montembeault, who I guess had been playing for them for a little bit. But
yeah, using their minors.
It just, to me, like you said, that Evgeny Dadonov hitting 70 points totally flew under the radar. Had no idea
28 goals.
Had no idea he put up that many points.
He was riding shotgun with Barkov, so it was him, Huberdeau, and Barkov, so it makes sense.
Yeah, I think if that roster can't crack the playoffs, especially in an Atlantic division, which, let's be honest here, has not been great.
Keith Yandel hit 62 points for them. Hello?
Yeah, he had a bounce back year, and if that roster can't crack the playoffs in a division that includes teams like, no offense to these teams, but the Ottawa Senators, the Detroit Red Wings, the Buffalo Sabres, who I don't think, despite their best efforts, I really don't think have revamped that roster enough to make the playoffs. But we can get to that. Yeah, if that roster doesn't make the playoffs, I don't really know what to tell you. Let's continue on here. We'll talk about the re-signs later. Let's just continue on with the free agent signing because that's the important part, right? This one was interesting for me. Matt Duchene to the Predators, 7 years, $8 million.
Yeah, but that had been like in talks forever. They struck out on Matt Duchene when he was in Colorado because they weren't going to trade him in the division. They struck out on him, so he went to Ottawa. Then in Ottawa, when he got traded to Columbus, Nashville struck out again. So this was their chance to finally be like, listen, Matt, Matty baby,
You're playing for the
Yeah.
Nashville Predators.
And to be fair, like, yeah, I mean, it works perfectly fine, right? Like, they get the top line center they've been looking for. Because, like, let's not beat around the bush. Matt Duchene was the biggest dick in the locker room in the first round of the playoffs. He single-handedly, like, not single-handedly, but he looked at the Tampa Bay Lightning and was like, nah, I don't care. And won. Like, he played like he was the best player on the ice every night. And a lot of nights he was the best player on the ice. Him and Artemi Panarin, and then you had, Seth Jones. But, like, it gives them a genuine game breaker to play with a guy like Philip Forsberg or Victor Arvidsson, Because Nashville, Nashville's also in a weird spot because of the PK Subban trade now. Because if they didn't get Matt Duchene, which is what the trade was for, was to free these cap space up for Matt Duchene, they would have been in a real weird spot. But, I mean, the goaltending, you have Pekka Rinne, who's like 37 or something, and then you have Pekka Rinne, and then you have UC Saros, who's ready to be an NHL starter at any moment. Like, he's raring to go, Smaller guy, but good, ready to go. Their decor is still kind of intact with Yossi, Ekholm, Ellis, and then it kind of, like, falls off a little bit. But it's, when your top four was Subban, Ekholm.
Yeah.
So they're in a weird spot. But, like, the Duchene trade definitely still, keeps them at, like, a Stanley Cup contender level to me because now down the middle you have Duchene and Ryan Johansson. And Ryan Johansson, I guess, turned out not to be the kind of point getter that they thought he was going to be. Like, he's not the 100-point getter, but, like, Duchene has proved he could be, like, the 90-point guy just based on the way he plays. So if you surround him with enough talent, which, let's be honest, he never really has been in Ottawa or in Colorado, but in Columbus, you can see he actually could put up a lot of points playing with guys like Artemi Panarin and Ryan Dzingel and things like that. So that works out for them. So they got their top flight center. I think the most interesting one for me, honestly, was Joe Pavelski leaving San Jose.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that for a second because the Sharks got their big re-sign. They re-signed Erik Karlsson.
Yeah.
That was, like, number one priority for them.
But the Erik Karlsson signing kind of was the end of the Joe Pavelski era because they couldn't afford to sign both of them.
And Joe Pavelski's proven repeatedly that he can be a 40-goal scorer.
Yeah.
And this really begs the question for me is where is this San Jose Shark roster going?
Yeah, I don't know.
Because Thornton, let's be honest here,
He's done.
If they don't sign him for 1 year for a farewell tour, he's out. Pavelski's gone.
You have Logan Couture.
They had Nyquist, he's gone. He went to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And you don't have the goaltending. I'm sorry, you don't have the goaltending to support a roster that is missing several key pieces.
Well, look at the roster in the first, what was it, the first 4 games of the Vegas series. They got terrible goaltending. Like, Martin Jones was incredibly average for that entire series. And that was the roster that included, and they were losing games that had a roster that included Joe Pavelski and Vander Kane. And, like, so the roster's only getting older, right? Like, they traded Justin Braun, right? They traded him away to Philly.
I forgot about that. He's now on the Flyers, so you lost another defenseman.
You're tied up in, I think it's some ridiculous amount of cap space in the top 3 defensemen, which is Karlsson, Burns, and Marc-Edouard Vlasic. All of whom, except for Erik Karlsson, I think all of whom are north of 30. I think Brett Burns is 32. Vlasic's like 33, and I think Carlson's 28 or 29. I think he's 28.
Erik Karlsson is 29 years old.
29. Okay, so yeah, they're all relatively close to 30 years old. They're all pretty much hitting that point in their career where it's like, this is it, right? Like you have to either try to win in the next so many years, or like they don't have the roster. Like Brendan Dillon, I think they traded. I don't think they have Brendan Dillon on the roster anymore either. I think he got traded, or is this he might still be on the roster? But like when your top 6 includes Semek, who I don't even think played many games in the NHL this season, like you have essentially a bunch of untouched, like unproven guys getting ready to play at a really, really important level for a team that wants to compete for a Stanley Cup, who just lost their captain, who was a 40-goal scorer and probably the best net front presence in the league.
Well, I just don't think that this. I don't think they're going to score goals in this forward core. I mean, who in this forward core is going to score goals?
Well, I mean, Timo Meier was a 30-goal scorer.
Logan Couture can do it.
Kevin LeBlanc can score goals. LeBanc can score goals. He did, but like Couture, you can put in the money in the bank. He's going to get points. He's the best player on the roster left. Thomas Hertl's good. Evander Kane is good.
The thing with that's really interesting to me about Pavelski is just how much he really facilitated that offense, because
Score a lot of pretty goals.
Right, but it's kind of like an Anders Lee sort of situation where, he's not the effort that he puts in front of the net's not always going to show up on his score sheet, but some of those goals, a lot of those goals aren't going in if he's not there.
Yeah.
Like causing chaos, dragging a defenseman away from him, away from the boards, just screening a goalie. That sort of stuff doesn't show up on a score sheet, but he really facilitates a lot of this offense, and I think he's going to kill it in Dallas with playing with guys that can shoot the puck as well as a Tyler Seguin or a Jamie Benn. I don't know if he's going to play with them, but...
Well, I mean, even just look at what Dallas got in general. Like, Dallas got him.
They got Matt Zuccarello.
Dallas does not...
Matt Zuccarello went from Dallas to the Wild.
Yeah, but, like, Dallas just managed to make themselves stronger.
They have Corey Perry. I mean, they took a flyer on him.
Yeah,
I mean,
forgot about Corey Perry. That's a low
even
risk.
if he puts 20 goals in the net for $1.5 million.
Well,
that's a great signing.
That's a low risk, very like high reward. Like you get him $1.5 million. He doesn't do anything. You take that.
It's
flyer
a 1-year deal, right? Like who cares?
But then if you get him and he puts up the 100 points, right? He's 2010 MVP Corey Perry again. It's like, wait, what? Like for $1.5 million. So that's really like.
I don't know. I think the Sharks. I think their window is officially closed. I'm closing the book on them. I don't think they're a Stanley Cup team anymore. I think they were
gonna do it. It had to be this year.
It either had to be the year they made it against the Penguins. They could have done it. It could have been this year, but once you lose Pavelski and then you're losing, guys like Zuccarello obviously didn't have for that long, but the fact that they let him walk, kind of questionable.
Walk, but yeah. Well, San Jose didn't let Zuccarello walk. Dallas did.
Oh yeah, I'm mixing my thoughts here. Yeah, so
you let Nyquist go.
You let Nyquist go for nothing. The Sharks have never really been a team that you could guarantee, they're gonna go far. They were a team that could easily go to the Stanley Cup Finals, or they could be out in the first round. And I mean, let's be honest here. If Vegas doesn't choke away that series, they're out in the first round again.
Yeah.
And even still, like they didn't. It's like they made a lot of noise going in otherwise. I mean, I don't know. I feel like this roster is just, it's over. It's over for them. Thornton's out. Brent Burns, within the next 3 years, is probably going to be traded. They didn't set themselves up for success in the way they built this roster. I really don't think.
Well, I mean, think about Logan Couture being like one of the better players in your roster. Like one of the guys you count on. He's 30 years old now. It's not like it's 24-year-old Logan Couture where like it's a transition. It's like he's 30. Like he's in his prime. You need to win now.
And he's not going to sit through a 5-year rebuild, which is where this team is headed because they've invested so heavily in this current iteration of the roster.
Yeah.
So tough times in San Jose. Kind of tough times.
It's tough times. Big tough times. Winnipeg. The Winnipeg roster kind of just imploded. Like. They lost Tyler Myers. They lost Jacob Trouba.
Kevin Hayes. And they didn't get any. They got Neil Pionk. It's tough times for them, and in a similar vein, it's very tough times for the Blue Jackets. I mean, both of these rosters just gutted. I mean,
the Blue Jackets knew at some point, like they were like, oh well, we'll try it, and it's like they went. And I have a ton of respect that they went all in on it, right? Like they tried.
Well, they went in for that all-out blitz. I mean, they traded for Duchesne.
It almost worked.
They went all in to either because if they win the cup this year, this is a different conversation. If they win the cup,
they won a Stanley Cup, so
right. If they win a cup and Panarin and Bobrovsky walk, everyone's like, that sucks, but we won the Stanley Cup.
So like you don't really care anymore.
They did great things, sweeping the Tampa Bay Lightning in the first round.
They played really well against the Bruins for most of that series.
They could have won that series as well, but it's tough for the Blue Jackets, and it's a very tough pill for their fans to swallow.
Well, I mean, the biggest question mark is who do you replace Sergei Bobrovsky with? You let a franchise goaltender walk for free.
Well, they did re-sign
Judis Korpisalo,
which is nice. That's great for them.
Yeah, but Korpisalo hasn't proven he could play 60 games in the NHL the way
he's
Sergei
not
Bobrovsky.
Sergei Bobrovsky, right? And
I mean, I think he could be a really good goaltender. He has the potential to be like an elite goaltender in the NHL, but like he's not exactly Sergei Bobrovsky, 2-time Vezina Trophy winner, like the only active 2-time Vezina Trophy winner in the league. Like,
I'm very surprised that they didn't go out and try to get Varlamov or Mrazek or Robin Lehner. I'm surprised that they just kind of sat on Korpisalo and said, this is what we're going forward with. But in a similar vein, I mean, I'm also not surprised because let's look at the Metropolitan Division as a whole, okay? Capitals are still a good team. They got a little weaker, still a good team.
right.
I think they're probably the best team theoretically in this division.
Yeah.
Then you look at the Devils. Massive upgrades this season. Just traded for PK Subban. They signed Wayne Simmons. They got a bona fide third line.
Jack Hughes.
They drafted Jack Hughes. Goaltending to me still kind of iffy.
Well,
if Schneider
Corey
can stop being hurt all the time.
Corey Schneider was like old Corey Schneider coming down the stretch. He finally won a game. He'd won a game in a calendar year. And he finally won,
Right.
and they started winning a lot.
If he can stay healthy, I can see it. They don't have a backup anymore.
Well, they traded away Keith Kincaid. He's now in Montreal, but
So they're going to start Mackenzie Blackwood probably in the backup role.
which is fine.
That's fine. The big question for me with the Devils is, again, Schneider's health. Because if Schneider goes down, Blackwood's not going to win you 30, 40 games that you need to get into the playoffs at this rate with this division. And this is kind of where this conversation is going. Islanders, question mark. They didn't really... They got their captain back when we re-signed Anders Lee, which is huge. Re-signed Eberle, re-signed Brock Nelson. Signed Varlamov for Robin Lehner. I don't know. Kind of questionable, but they're a bubble team, in my opinion, and it hurts to say that as an Islander fan, but really, when you look at how strong this division's getting, Rangers, massive upgrades this offseason. I mean, Jacob Trouba and Artemi Panarin, like, right there.
Yeah.
Capo Caco, right there. That puts you in the playoff conversation, like, instantly.
Yeah.
Carolina Hurricanes, again, kind of a bubble team. Gained some, lost some. Kept Peter Mrazek, which was big for them. Kind of a bubble team. You look at the Penguins. Traded away Phil Kessel. I think they're kind of coming to the realization that their window's starting to close. I still think that roster can get it done and be a bubble playoff team as well. And then you look at the Blue Jackets. I mean, they're probably arguably the weakest team in this division right now. But 7 out of the 8 teams in this division theoretically could make the playoffs.
Yeah.
Is kind of what I'm trying to get at here. The division is wide open. So, really, when it comes down to teams making moves, I don't know if the Blue Jackets have really made enough moves to stay competitive in this division. Because it's, in my opinion, this is the best division in hockey.
Well, they lost their leading scorer, right? You lost your franchise
goaltender.
You lose your franchise player, your franchise goaltender. You lose some secondary scoring. The first line center that you traded for that you'd been looking for I don't know, forever, right?
And then Dzingle's gone too.
Yeah. But Dzingel didn't really play that well for them.
I mean, they signed Nyquist, okay, but I think this roster needs a serious retool if they're going to stay competitive, because this division is stacked from head to toe. I mean, like I said, 7 out of the 8 teams in this division could realistically make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
It's bananas how good this division is. So tough times in Columbus. And like you said, tough times in Winnipeg. I mean, what did they really do this offseason besides get worse, in theory?
Literally get worse. That's all they did. And they still haven't signed Patrick Laine or Kyle Connor.
And they still have Connor Hellebuck.
I mean, yeah. I mean, their core is intact, right? Like, you still have Blake Wheeler, Mark Scheifele. Like, I'm not saying they're a bad team, but it's like you have to trade Jacob Trouba because he won't sign because personal reasons, which I respect the hell out of, right? Like, he said this to his fiance, like, if we're gonna make this work, like, I will invest in your career the way you invested in mine, right? And came up to Winnipeg, so he wanted to go to the United States. Fine, okay. So he got traded to New York. Even better for me, right? He gets traded to the New York Rangers. We get a number one defenseman out of it, without giving up really anything. We gave them back their first round pick and Neil Pionk. Okay. I mean, like, Neil Pionk could have been like a top 4 guy, maybe, but like whatever. I have Jacob Trouba, like, I don't care anymore, right? 25, 7 years until he's 32. They haven't signed Kyle Connor or Patrick Laine, both of which nobody's offer sheeted, and they're not arbitration eligible, so this standoff could go well into the season. You could see another Nylander situation. I don't. That's the thing with Mitch Marner though, but I don't think you will because I think they're going to be too inclined to get this done because they're too important. Those players. You still have Nikolai Ehlers, who underperformed last season, but the season before was like a 40-goal scorer. I mean, again, like Wheeler, Scheifele, Dustin Byfuglien. You lose Tyler Myers, that's big too. On the right side, right-handed, big right shot defense when you lose to Vancouver, which Vancouver got better. Vancouver's a weird team, but like it is like they're very strange right now, the way their roster is being constructed. But so yeah, that's not the worst, right? Like Winnipeg still can get into the playoffs in the Central Division, based entirely in the Central Division, having teams like the Wild, who I don't think are very good. The Wild, I mean, like that division's tough though. I mean, like in theory, 7 of those teams can make the playoffs too. The only team that I really don't think could make the playoffs is Minnesota. Like, I think Chicago got hot. Like, they almost got in the playoffs this year, based entirely on the strength of Patrick Kane and, you know.
Then Chicago signed Leonard, and if Leonard has another Vezina nomination type season.
Yeah.
Well, because there's also that. And I realized that when we were talking about the Metropolitan, I did skip the Flyers. We all know the Flyers got better. They probably had one of the best off seasons in the league as well. Just trading for every guy under the sun because they were like just eating cap because they had it. Still, their goaltending's still questionable. If you don't start Carter Hart, like you have to start him, but for some reason they don't want to, and I don't understand why. But
they have Brian Elliott. Didn't they sign Brian Elliott again?
Yeah, I don't know. That Philadelphia needs to figure out the goaltending, but they can make the playoffs as well. Yeah, they're in a tough division. I mean, if St. Louis can repeat the end of the season, if they have another horrible start to the season, I don't know if you can make miracles happen twice.
I mean, no, this was a Cinderella run. This was like ordained from God, right? Like you go from last on January 1st to Stanley Cup,
winning a Stanley Cup,
to ascending the mountain, right? Like you're at the top, like you're literally at top of hockey, the hockey mecca. Like you won a Stanley Cup. That's it. Like that's where it ends. Like, you did it.
And they did sign Binnington, but here's the thing. Binnington had an incredible end of the year and a phenomenal playoffs. I'm not taking that away from him.
There have been way too many flash in the pans like that, though. I mean, like, what was the last one? The last
Andrew Hammond?
Yeah, the Hamburglar. The Hamburglar went, like, 25-1 down the stretch, and then he got to the playoffs. And he got them. I think he got them out of the first round, didn't he? He got them to, like...
I don't remember what happened his rookie year, but I know it was the following year.
It was absolutely a disaster.
Fell off the wagon, and now where is he? I mean, I haven't even heard of him in the
he signed. Somebody signed Andrew Hammond, I think.
Yeah, it's just...
I don't remember, but yeah, he got signed by somebody.
So, I'm not saying Binnington's going to do that.
But, like, you can't put all your eggs in the basket, which is why they still have Jake Allen on the roster. Which... I don't know about the Jake Allen thing. Like, listen, like, Jake Allen's not terrible, but, like, you know, hey, he hasn't exactly been great for them either.
Yeah, did they re-sign him?
His contract wasn't up. He had 2 years left on that contract.
I'm probably mistaken here. So...
They were probably going to trade him, I think, was the thing.
St. Louis... Interesting team again. I don't know. Yeah, okay, so he's under contract. Jake Allen is right. Yeah. Okay.
So he's kind of an insurance policy, but like
Because
a really
I
leaky insurance policy you don't want to have to use.
I don't think he's as bad as the team made him out to be.
I mean, he wasn't playing good. The team
But
wasn't
he
playing
wasn't-
good either.
Yeah, it was just the whole team was just falling apart around him. But yeah, so that's an interesting division. Dallas obviously getting better, signing Joe Pavelski. Minnesota, they got Zuccarello. That core is kind of old. Parise and Suter. I remember when they signed Parise and Suter, everyone was like, "Give them the cup now," and it's just like
That never worked out.
Have they ever made it to they made it to the Western Conference Finals?
I don't think so.
I don't think
they got in the
they've
second
been out
round.
of the second round. So clearly that experiment has failed. Nashville, interesting team. They lost a significant piece in Subban. They also lost Wayne Simmons. They got Duchesne.
Wayne Simmons was the rental, right? So like you really can't like I hate to count like guys like that into the roster. Like when you're talking about who they win, who they lost, and who they gained, because it's like okay, well Wayne Simmons played 25 games down the stretch, right? They traded for him, but he got paid big, $5 million for 1 year. That's a lot of money. I mean, I'm not saying it's bad. He's a 3-4 time 30 goal scorer. You know, he's a character guy. He's a guy you want in your locker room, especially for a team like New Jersey, right? New
There's
Jersey.
a lot of young.
Yeah, he's a
talent.
character guy. Like he's a professional. He's tough. He can protect them too. Like you could send him out there to protect Jack Hughes. Not that the NHL is like that anymore, but like he is also acts as a deterrent. He's a big,
Right.
tough guy. He's had how many fights in his fucking career, So he's just a big like losing him sucks, but it's like not the biggest thing. It's like same thing with Brian Boyle. Like, they lost Brian Boyle, but it's not like the worst thing in the world. I mean, Brian Boyle helps, right? He's a good fourth line center. Wayne Simmons helps. He's a good middle six forward. Like he can play the power play. He's a big
Play
guy.
the penalty kill. He's like a utility kind of.
Yeah, he's the guy that can play 9 positions in baseball. Like he can do whatever you need him to
Right.
do, and he does it pretty much well. Does everything pretty well. So that sucks. They lost him. The biggest one, like you said, the biggest one is PK Subban. They lost, but they gained Matt Duchesne. So it was like, is it kind of a wash? Because
Well, and the other part about it is this gives them insurance next year to be able to sign Yossi when his contract comes up.
that was the other big part, was the freeing up the money this year to sign.
Yossi next year, because he's getting at least 7.5 if he wants to take a nice hometown discount.
I mean, he's gonna get at least the Trouba contract. I would
Right.
think he's gonna get close to I don't know the Doughty contracts, like because Doughty's making $10 million.
I think if he wants to take a hometown discount,
I
he'll
think
take
it'd be like
7.5. But if he wants to get paid like he's supposed to get paid,
Maybe like an $8 or $9 million contract.
$8.5 to $9 million contract.
Yeah, but he's worth it. I mean, it's the captain of your team, the best defenseman on the team, arguably
Right.
your best player, like all around best player.
So that's kind of what's going on over there. I do want to talk about two teams in particular going up north of the border, and I also want to talk about the Sabres. So let's start with the Sabres because, in my opinion, there's not as much to talk about there.
Right.
What do you make of this Jeff Skinner contract? $8 million, 8 years, $9 million a year.
I mean, he's been a 30 goal scorer a bunch in his career. He's been a 40 goal scorer. He's a streaky guy. Like he scores, he gets hot, cold, right? So he's always been in Carolina, so it's really been hard to tell. He's been playing with great players. So he finally was riding shotgun with Jack Eichel, and like he scored 40 goals. He was on pace to score like 60 goals at one point this season. Like he was on fire. So I think like I don't think it's a terrible contract. Like I think it's tough. Like it's not. I don't know if it's the kind of money you want to hand out, but like you also can't afford to lose those goals, right? Like you can't afford to lose those 40 plus goals that he scored for you this year because you're already kind of an anemic team on offense as it is, right? I mean, you have Jack Eichel, him, now you have Jimmy Vesey, who got traded there from the Rangers, who freed up the cap to sign Artemi Panarin, which was also really funny to me because ironically they traded him back to Buffalo, who had acquired his rights, and he wouldn't sign with them. But then the Rangers were like, well, you have no say in this, so we're trading you there anyway.
Right.
So they traded him to Buffalo. So, I mean, that might add some offense. Then, like, maybe he actually lives up to his potential in Buffalo because he couldn't in New York,
They have
That's
Kyle Okposo.
They have Kyle Okposo who's eating cap, $6 million a year.
So, because they did make a nice move. They signed Marcus Johansson, who I
Well,
think
yeah,
is a
adds-
good player for them.
Adds a 60-point guy to their middle six, or their top six.
Here's the thing. Do you think they're signing Jeff Skinner entirely on the basis of his skill, or do you think a little bit of this is an attempt to show Jack Eichel that they're going to invest in the team?
I think it's a little both. I think what Jack Eichel is like, I'm starting to wonder if he might be the problem. Like, not to sound like be like that guy, but like, how many, like, remember when Edmonton was the problem? It was like how many coaches they went through in Edmonton, how many coaches they're still going through in Edmonton. It's like, does Buffalo want to go to the same thing? It's like, what do they have? Dan Bilesma, they had Nolan, Bilesma, fucking, then they get Phil Housley for 2 seasons. Housley gets an axe, and now they have Kruger, who, if he doesn't work out, then what are they going to axe him to and get another coach? Like, you know, like my thing with Jack Eichel is like, I think Jack Eichel's good, right? But I think the comparisons between him and Connor McDavid are so kind of overblown to a degree, because like Connor McDavid, like, he's not in the same class of player as Connor McDavid. He's just not. He's like in the same class of player to me as somebody like Austin Matthews, right? Like, still very, very elite talent in the NHL, right? Like 40 goal scorer Austin Matthews, but like not Connor McDavid, the best player in the NHL. Like, to me, that's like a reserve for like, it's like Connor McDavid, Sidney Crosby, you know, guys like that. So it's like him, Patrick Laine, because he might be the best goal scorer in the league. Like
Taylor Hall,
yeah. Taylor Hall's a little older, but yeah, in that class of player. Capo Caco, maybe eventually. Jack Hughes, eventually. Like, you know, guys that are like really like generational talents, right? And that's not to say like he isn't a generational talent, but like he's just not in that same like class as like, you know, best player on the planet. Like, Connor McDavid is arguably the best player on the planet. So those comparisons really were like big when he got drafted. But then it's like he really hasn't, like, I mean, in 286 games he got 259 points, right? Like, that's what you want out of a top as a first line center. Like, first line centers aren't easy to come by either. So like for him to be almost a point a game in his career, it's great. But like, I don't know. I just think like you can see sometimes he's not trying, things like that. Like when the team was bad, he didn't care, and like that's not good to see. But I think this season he actually turned the corner. Like, he tried every night. You could tell they gave him the captaincy. You could see like he really like tried, like he really wanted to play. So I think that was a really important step for like to see in Jack Eichel, to be like make his way towards being like a top flight center in the NHL. It also helps that like he had talent. They finally the organization finally bought into, well, if we're gonna build around him, we should spend money, right? So they brought in Kyle Okposo first, which was like, okay,
many years ago.
But then it's like they trade for, you know, Jeff Skinner, and it's like, oh, okay, that was the big trade. I mean, they had Alex Nylander they wanted to try to play, but they traded him to Chicago, which was interesting. What did they get for him? They got a defenseman, I think.
They still have Rasmus Ristolainen. You have Dahlin. Rasmus Dahlin.
Yeah,
Fallen for Dahlin.
Rasmus Dahlin.
Is that
So
it's a Carter Hutton in there, right?
Yeah, they didn't make any moves for goaltenders.
Yeah. So, I guess the reason I kind of ask you that is because Jack Eichel's personality, whether fairly or unfairly, was very well documented going into that draft.
Mm-hmm.
That whole video about him coming out where he was like wasted out of his mind, and he was like, "I'm coming for you, Buffalo," or like that whole thing. So whether fairly or unfairly, his attitude was very well documented coming into that draft, and clearly he's a very boisterous personality. He's not like a Connor McDavid who's fairly even-keeled
and quiet.
Fairly quiet. He's not like a John Tavares who you're never going to get a soundbite out of him. Even after he got like hellaciously pounded against the Islanders, didn't get a soundbite out of him. Even keel kind of guy. Jack Eichel's not that kind of guy. He's a fiery personality. You could clearly tell he's very passionate about the game, but you can also tell he gets frustrated very easily. And to be fair, in his years in Buffalo, they have not even been close to a playoff team.
My thing with that, like, I have no problem with someone being fiery, right? Like I think that hockey in of itself as a sport has done a lot to kill the idea of having a personality. Like, you don't get sound bites out of these guys. It's like, but why not? Like, where's the fun in everybody being like, well, you know, they played a hard
tough
game.
Season so far.
Yeah,
We've
like,
won 3 games in 28 games.
Like, I'm glad like someone would be like Jack, would be like, I'm tired of losing. Like, I don't want to lose anymore. And he comes out and he came out. And I think that's literally a quote of his. Like, I'm tired of losing. Like, Ryan O'Reilly said it. Like, it makes me show. It shows that he cares. Like, he doesn't want to, like, if you're just content to keep losing.
That's not the kind of player you want to have on a roster anyway.
No, he's just like, well, they're paying me and we're losing. It's like, no, like, he's like, I don't want to lose. I want to win a Stanley Cup. Like, good. Like, He's fiery. He's young too. He's
22 years old.
He's our age. He's 22. Yeah.
Right.
So like.
So of course, like you can expect him to get frustrated
And he'd be fired up very easily. He's a kid essentially. Like.
I guess the point I'm trying to make is like, to me, he seems like the kind of guy, and this is not a knock on him at all. Don't take this the wrong way, but he seems like the kind of guy who would not be afraid to ask for a trade if he doesn't see the playoffs in the next 2 years.
No, he probably would. I don't see why he would. Like he wants to win, and like he's not afraid to step on toes to win. Like he wants to win hockey games.
And that's not a knock on him. That's just the kind of guy he is. He's not like a
Connor McDavid will quietly sit on his hands for 7, 8, 9 years on an Edmonton Oilers team that is not going anywhere and not say anything just because I'm happy to play the game, you know? But it's like you're the best player in the league.
John Tavares did it for 9 years. I mean, he kind of just did his job for 9 years on the island and then he left. I don't think Jack Eichel's that kind of guy. So I think this is kind of an attempt by management to say, hey, look, like we're going to seriously commit to this team.
It was the one thing the Islanders never did for John Tavares when he was here.
Sign a big name free agent.
Yeah, was to convince him to say, like, all of his line mates, they let Walker traded.
Molson walked.
They
traded
Molson, remember?
For traded to Thomas Vanek. That was an attempt, but then that didn't work, and then Thomas Vanek was gone.
They let P.A. Parento walk.
Yeah, so I think it's an interesting offseason for Buffalo. I hope for their sake that they make the playoffs because I think they're an exciting young hockey team. I love watching them play. I don't know if they'll make the playoffs. The division is kind of weak, so they could make it. I'm just disappointed that Alex Nylander got traded because it would have been cool to have like your two top line centers, both of these American kids, and you have the Nylander brothers. And then you have like the big defenseman. Like it really just added to the drama of like the Toronto Buffalo rivalry that could have been there. And now it's like, oh, they traded to Alexander Nylander, which is fine, but it's also just like, oh, that sucks. Like that would have been cool. So let's stay in the Atlantic Division because there's two more teams I want to talk about.
Would one of them happen to be the Toronto Maple Leafs?
So let's talk about Toronto because this is a team that is very interesting. Obviously, Mitch Marner still not under contract. Everyone knows that story.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that story. I want to talk about what Toronto's done this offseason, just in general. Maybe, we can talk about Mitch Marner. Let's get that out of the way first. What do you think is going on between Mitch Marner and the Toronto Maple Leafs?
I just think he wants what he deserves. I mean, he's the best player on that roster, and you can quote me on that. I will continue to say Mitch Marner is the best player on the Toronto Maple Leaf roster. He just is. He made John Tavares a better hockey player. John Tavares was a 35 goal guy before that. He'd broken 80 points a couple of times. He had 48 goals and almost an 80 and like 85 plus points, almost 100 points playing with Mitch Marner. Because Mitch Marner allows John Tavares to do things John Tavares does best, which is get open and wait for the puck. He doesn't have to be the guy to get the puck and hold the puck and make the play. And that's not to say he can't, because he's done it his whole career up to this point, but it's like, it's nice now that he can ride shotgun with Mitch Marner, who's probably the most dynamic and exciting player in the Eastern Conference when he's on his good night. You know what I mean? Like he can skate, he can shoot, he can score, and he's got the best vision on the ice. Like the way he passes that puck is unreal. So it's like, he deserves the money. Like he deserves the $11 million, right? And even if he's willing to take the cut for $9 million, right?
The reason I kind of stopped you there. What do you think they're trying to offer him? Like, what do you think Toronto's trying to pay him?
I think Toronto's trying to give him like 7.5, 8 for like a short term. Like they're trying to give him like a bridge deal maybe. Like a bridge deal's not bad, right? Like I think Patrick Laine is a perfect example. He's probably gonna get a bridge deal because like he had a rough second season. So it's like you bridge him into his next season, and then if he continues to play, then you offer him his big boy money. Kyle Connor's probably gonna get his big boy money. He's been consistent. Like there's no variation, there's no deviation on his goal scoring. So like he's been consistent. 30-30 gets his big boy money.
So if you're the GM of...
if I'm the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs, I'm giving Mitch Marner $11 million a year. I'm not letting Mitch Marner walk, and I'm not fighting.
You're not having another Nylander situation.
And I'm not gonna have a standoff go to December 1st, and I'm not gonna let another team try to offer sheet him, and I'm not trading him either. He's the best player on my roster. He's better than Austin Matthews. Like, it just is an all-around, like, dynamic sense. He's better than Austin Matthews. I'm not gonna say Austin Matthews is bad. I mean, Austin Matthews is a 2-time 40-goal scorer. Like, he's a great hockey player. But, like, Mitch Marner, to me, is just better. Mitch Marner is going to be a 100-point guy. Like, easy. Him and John Tavares, combined with now some of the guys they traded for, like Kapanen still on the roster, Kerfoot Like you add some of those guys to that, like that's 100 points easy with for Mitch Marner. So it's like they should just give him the Austin Matthews contract, right? Like you double down on Austin Matthews, like he's the future, but it's like why does it take so long to double down on a guy like Mitch Marner who is
He's clearly just as, if not more talented.
Who's clearly just as talented, if not more talented. He's more talented, not talented, more important to the roster.
I would argue dynamic, like you were saying. I think Matthews is a phenomenal player, but he's not one-dimensional to say. But it's we're really comparing a diamond ring to an all-gold watch. Like you're comparing two phenomenal players. But I do agree that Mitch Marner seems to be more of a facilitator, where he makes others around him better, whereas Austin Matthews is more of the finisher.
Matthews doesn't say he doesn't make the players around him better too, right? Like he's got Zach Hyman playing on his left wing, and it makes Hyman a better player. And Hyman's not a bad player, but he's like a middle six forward on the other team. But with Austin Matthews, he's 20 goal scorer, like 55-point guy, like that kind of thing, But even like Nylander's a good hockey player, he's a 60-point guy. But playing with Austin Matthews makes it so much easier for him to hit those 60 points.
Right.
But like Mitch Marner is getting points no matter who he plays with. He doesn't care. You can put him on a line with like Carlo Kolyakova, who hasn't played hockey in 15 years, and he'll get a point because he'll give him the puck, or he'll just be like, give me the puck and I'll do it and I'll score, Like he's much more dynamic. He can do a lot more on the ice than like Austin Matthews is a great shooter. That's his thing, right? He's got that amazing wrist shot, curls into his skates and rips it in the top glove. He's good in front of the net. He's tough to knock off the puck. He's a big guy. He's 6'2" or 6'3". Like he's a big guy, Austin Matthews. So he's not as and he's not as flashy. Mitch Marner's like 5'10". He's cut from the same cloth that Patrick Kane is. Smaller, more dynamic, hard to hit, hard to read, very shifty. Like so, they just need to give him the money. Like there's no reason you don't give him the money. And then they went out and traded for Cody Ceci, right?
And
Tyson Barrie.
You get rid of Zaitsev, okay, but let's be honest here. Like comparing Zaitsev to Ceci, Ceci's just a better player. He's just a better all-around player, in my opinion.
They made themselves better. They're actually a tougher team now than they were at the end of the season, right? Because now they have Tyson Barrie too,
which boggles my mind that they somehow finagled this cap situation. But that's actually another thing. They're not out of the woods on that yet.
No,
because according to our friends at Cap Friendly, who, by the way, if you guys have never used Cap Friendly, is a phenomenal website if you're a friggin' nerd like we are. Right now on this roster, their projected cap hit is $77 million. Obviously, they're not gonna have that much because they have 8 defensemen and 13 forwards on the roster right now. So they're gonna free up some money. Their projected cap right now is $3.7 million. So they need to find roughly $7.3 million somewhere, which you send out a couple guys, okay, obviously you can try to finagle that in a way.
You can vary some contracts, yeah.
So they're not out of the woods. They still need to find the money for Marner. Obviously they can sign him in the offseason because you're allowed to go over the cap. But come regular season,
they have to get under that cap, yeah.
But it just is a thing. A lot of people are saying that they're gonna put Nathan Horton on LTIR.
He's been a long-term injured reserve for the last how many seasons?
His career's probably over.
Oh, it is over.
But
remember they did David Clarkson contract?
Yeah, well. But that being the case, that's actually very interesting now that I'm looking at this defensive core. The only one of these 7 defensemen that's in contract past next season is Morgan Riley. They need to sign 5 defensemen next season, but that's a problem for next season, not this season. So
this season they're stuck with the Mitch Marner contract, trying to figure that out.
So that yeah, and I agree. I think this team, believe it or not, is better than the roster was last year in a tighter cap than they thought they were gonna have. So
with an upgraded defensive core that they've been looking for. Because now think about it. You have not only Morgan Riley, you lose Jake Gardner. Okay, fine. But you have
Cody Ceci, Tyson
Barrie, and Jake Muzzin is your top 4 with Morgan Riley.
And then you can put any one of Ben Harper, Travis Dermott, Martin Marincin, Justin Holl on the bottom 6.
Yeah.
That's serviceable. Those guys are all serviceable bottom 6.
Well, Travis Dermott is super good. He could be like a top 4 defenseman. He's an offensive guy. So like you play him on that bottom 6 and you give him power play time, like that's it, man.
So yeah, it's very interesting in Toronto.
I think Toronto could honestly next season. I think Toronto has a chance to win the division.
I thought they were going to compete for a Stanley Cup this year. I really did.
They ran into the Bruins.
I thought that roster was just stacked to hell, and now it's stacked to hell. In terms of just young, talented, fast, and they've gotten faster because Cece's a better skater than Nikita Zaitsev is. Kerfoot's a better skater than some of the guys they had. And Kapanen's fast as hell. I mean, even you have Jason Spezza, who, if he doesn't work out, whatever, you paid him $700,000.
I mean, you lost Patrick Marleau, but you lost old Patrick Marleau.
Right. I think this roster can easily win the Atlantic Division, especially considering that Boston has gotten a little bit worse. I think this is Chara's swan song. I think this is his last year.
I mean, Tampa Bay's still as good as they were last year, but, well, they haven't signed Braden Point yet, but that's a whole other thing.
And they also lost Stroman, but tomato, kind of.
Yeah.
The last team I did specifically want to talk about in the Atlantic Division is the Montreal Canadiens, specifically because they have done pretty much nothing besides piss off the Carolina Hurricanes by trying to offer sheet Sebastian Aho.
By calling Carolina, asking if they'd match an offer sheet. They said yes. They said don't try to offer sheet him. If you want him, we'll try and talk to us about a trade. They offer sheeted him anyway. Offer sheets never work. I don't know why anybody tries them. Like, literally, a team can't afford not to match.
And the reason I want to talk about them specifically is for Carey Price. And the way this roster is shaping up, with how competitive this division is getting, the Bruins are still a good team. I think they're a little bit worse, but they're still a good team. The Leafs are, in my opinion, far and away the most... Not far and away. I'll say the Leafs and the Lightning are far and away the most talented teams in this division. Just raw, hockey talent. And then you have teams like Panthers are going to be competitive this year. They're going to be competitive with the roster overhaul. Red Wings, Senators, they're still kind of rebuilding. They're still in that kind of weird situation. But, you have arguably one of, if not the best goaltenders in the National Hockey League, Carey Price. I mean, he's been the guy for so long. And
I mean, it's him and Sergei Bobrovsky right at the top of the mountain right now, so...
But the Habs have not been playoff relevant
since 2014.
Really. Yeah, I mean,
they made the playoffs that one year, but they lost to the Rangers again in the first round.
So it's just, I guess my point is, what is this roster doing? Because they're kind of wasting Carey Price when you really think about this. I mean, they're wasting one of the best goaltenders we've ever seen. What is your opinion on, I guess, how management's handling it, what this roster is doing, and could you conceivably see Carey Price out of Montreal in the next 4 years?
I mean...
He's 31, so next 4 years would take him to 35.
I don't know what the roster is necessarily doing. Excuse me. It's not... It's weird. It's not a young roster. It's not an old roster either. It's just...
I mean, they made the Max Domi trade, which was great for them.
Yeah, they got Jonathan
He's been a whole other player.
Jonathan Drouin's good. You got Gallagher,
It just seems like... You know what it seems like to me? It just seems like they underperform every single year. It just seems like they're such a ho-hum, underperforming, unexciting, just mediocre hockey team year after year.
Mm-hmm. Sounds about right.
And it really makes you question, where do you see this roster going?
I mean, I don't see how it competes for a Stanley Cup,
right,
without signing or filling big holes that they have. Their scoring is kind of anemic. There's not a high end talent. There's Max Domi and Jonathan Drouin, but
a lot of the players are facilitators. Brendan Gallagher's a facilitator. He's not going to be the one to put in 40 goals, but he helps. He
scores 30. I mean,
he helps facilitate that kind of action, but. They just don't have a game breaker. I mean, they really don't, and they really have never had a game breaker. I mean, in the last 4 or 5 years,
they've had a game breaker since probably the 70s. The Jackie Lafleur on the roster, Steve Shutt.
You could argue Subban, but it's hard for defensemen to be game breakers in terms of scoring, which is really what the roster needs. I don't know. I feel like
Carey Price is a game breaker.
Yeah. But there's only so much he can do,
he can only win so many games on his own.
I don't know. I feel like we could conceivably see Carey Price out of Montreal in the next 4 years.
I wouldn't doubt it. If they're looking to rebuild, I mean, like, he'd be the first person I'd look to trade. He's got the most value.
And I don't think he wants to leave, but I also don't think he wants to. You know, it's different. Like, Henrik Lundqvist with the Rangers has had deep playoff runs, substantial playoff runs with that
He
team.
competed for a Stanley Cup. Like, he actually got there.
Several Eastern Conference Finals trips. Only one unfortunate Eastern Conference championship, but several Eastern Conference Finals runs. Several deep, talented hockey teams. A Stanley Cup run against the LA Kings. Several memorable playoff runs, like the one time when they played the Canadiens, Dustin Tokarski when they had Martin St. Louis on the roster. Carey Price really hasn't had that. You know, Henrik Lundqvist has had tons of incentive to stay on the Rangers, even through the rebuild, because he's had his deep playoff runs, he's had his fun. Carey Price really has not had that. I mean, for all the great that...
I think the longest playoff run he had was against the Rangers in the Eastern Conference Final.
And he was hurt that year.
He got hurt in the Eastern Conference Final. He got hurt in Game 1.
It's just, I don't know, for all the lore and spectacle around Carey Price, that he's never had a team that has been able to take him, in my opinion, where he deserves to go. So I think they need to do something. I don't know what. I couldn't tell you what, but Montreal needs to do something, because if they don't figure it out soon, I think you'll see Carey Price kind of starting to get a little iffy about staying on that team. And I think you could similarly say for John Gibson in Anaheim, where they're clearly not phoning it in, but I mean, they haven't really done anything to convince anyone that they could be any better than last year. So
I think they're trying to figure out what their rebuild's going to look like. So I don't think Anaheim really knows what to do yet, because like they just got rid of Corey Perry, you know.
Right.
So it's like, what are you going to do with that roster now?
Carey Price has played 624 regular season games. He's played 60 playoff games. He's made the playoffs 8 times in his career, playing no more than 12 games. There's no incentive to stay on this team if they're not going to support him the way he deserves to be supported. Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. Is there any kind of last minute things you wanted to bring up before we?
No, I just thought free agency was a little like, I mean, it wasn't as wild as everybody like made it out to be. There's no offer, like people were talking about offer sheets like crazy. But, like,
everyone was saying Braden Point was going to get offer sheeted.
No,
Marner was going to get offer sheeted.
But
Aho
like,
did get offer sheeted, but it was kind of a meme.
Like, no one's actually going to offer sheet, because you know how like the league, you have to work in this league. Like, you have to live with those GMs. Like, if you're you need help. Like, they're the people they're going to help you. So you're kind of like biting the hand that feeds. You know, like you don't do that. And the league doesn't like offer sheets either. Like, the actual league itself does not like offer sheets. It never has. So it's like, and they've never worked. Like,
Yeah. Well, I feel like the league doesn't want it to turn into basketball where a 22-year-old superstar gets to decide what he wants to do. Not that I'm saying these players shouldn't have a say in where they go, but you also don't want to have a system where Toronto, Montreal, Boston, the Rangers are just constantly signing
you don't want to go back to the
young
way,
talent off of.
you don't want to go
teams
back to
that
the
don't
way the
have money.
NHL worked. Like, the NHL used to work like that, and then the salary cap made it so it doesn't work like that anymore.
And I think that's a great thing. I think parity in this league is one of the best. Is something that makes hockey better than almost any other sport, because you can't just go out and buy whoever the hell you want. I mean,
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. It was interesting. As an Islanders fan, it was slightly disappointing. It still could get better. I would love to see us take a flyer on Jake Gardiner and kind of shore up that top four.
I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't, right?
You know, I'm disappointed that we didn't sign Leonard. I would have rather kept him than Varlamov.
The thing with Leonard's weird, though. That Chicago signing still doesn't make a whole lot of sense with me.
It's just, you know what? I think the biggest issue is it's weird for Leonard to go to the Blackhawks after the way they kind of handled that whole Scott Darling thing. And Scott Darling's battle with similar things to Robin Leonard has been well documented. It's the reason why he's not playing currently. And I'm not saying the Blackhawks organization did anything wrong necessarily, but clearly it wasn't the same kind of support system that the Islanders put in place for Leonard. I mean, the Islanders basically, sold the house for him and they gave him everything he needed, the time off that he needed, the space, the support. I'm not saying the Blackhawks necessarily did anything wrong. I'm not saying they pressured Darling into playing or this, that, or the other thing.
Actually, they completely understood how addiction and mental illness work that way. That's kind of the issue. It was they didn't. I mean, Scott Darling ended up being really good for them, right? It's at some point they figured it out, but I think he more or less figured it out on his own. I think he came to terms with his alcoholism. But my biggest thing is just from a hockey perspective, it's they still have Corey Crawford. It's are they using Leonard as an insurance policy, or are they going to?
Crawford's been made of glass for the last couple of years.
Are you going to split time with him, because Leonard's not going to go back to backing up, not for $5 million a year.
Not after what he did last year, no.
I mean,
absolutely.
And for $5 million a year, that's not backup money. You didn't sign him to be a backup,
right?
So.
No, I agree. That's from that kind of perspective, it's very strange. Yeah, I don't know. It is very interesting free agency. Do you have any hot takes you want to throw at us in the last?
No, I don't think there's anything really. I mean, I think Toronto might if Toronto manages to figure out their cap situation, which they're going to because they have to. I think they'll win the Atlantic Division. I don't think Tampa Bay has a Cinderella run like they did last year to 62 wins. They kind of just stepped on everyone. Hottest take, I mean, I'll see the Devils and the Rangers make the playoffs. Just because I think Jack Hughes can be dynamic enough to get them in. Jack Hughes and Taylor Hall, and I think the Rangers, you really can't count the Rangers out with Henrik Lundqvist and now Artemi Panarin
and Jacob Trouba.
Right, and part of the pieces that were already there, so Zemika Zibanejad and things like that.
Chris Kreider's still there, although the idea, some people are saying he's going to get traded, but
yeah,
I guess
the Rangers don't want to take that. They're either going to sign him or they're going to trade him. They don't want to take that uncertain that to the deadline again, like they did. And also people forgot we signed Adam Fox.
You still have Buchnevich,
who has to get signed. So it's there are still players in this roster that are good. They have Kravtsov who came over. The younger guys are ready to play. Elias Anderson, Philip Hedl. So it's the Rangers could make a lot of noise. I don't think they're Stanley Cup contenders by any stretch, but I think they make the playoffs. They make the playoffs.
I think my hottest take, not really a hot take necessarily, but Metropolitan, in my opinion, hands down the best division of hockey at this point. And I think you're going to see the difference between first and eighth in the Metropolitan Division is going to be, I will say, less than 12 points. I think you could reasonably see a 10-point spread, a 5-game spread between first and last. I think these teams are just going to constantly just trade home and away and wins and losses. I think this division is just going to beat each other up all year in terms of trading games, just because of how close everyone is now. I still think Capitals are going to win the division. I think the Blue Jackets are going to be last in the division, but I think it's going to be very close. And
well, yeah, that's the thing, right? Nobody's saying the Blue Jackets are going to be bad, but it's if they finish last in the most competitive division in hockey, and it's only
after the offseason they had, I mean, can you really blame them?
Yeah.
So that's going to do it for this episode. Next episode, probably if something huge happens, if Mitch Marner gets traded or whatever, we might do short little 30-minute blurb on that. But otherwise, I think the next big episode will probably do maybe start of training camps when they announce who gets on the training camp rosters for these teams.
Yeah, and then there'll be probably regular increments from there because training camp, and then it's preseason, and then it's the regular season.
And then we can start doing weekly episodes come regular season. So this might be the last you hear from us for a little bit until training camp opens up. But for now, we will sign off, and we will see you guys in the next episode.